This changed more than Norway. Norway did not get rich just because it found oil. A lot of countries found oil. Many of them ended up weaker, more corrupt, or more dependent. That matters now because when resource-rich states break down, the effects spill into energy prices, inflation, markets, and political stability. So the real story is not oil alone. Most people hear the simple version. Norway found petroleum, built a huge sovereign wealth fund, and became rich. But that leaves out the part that actually matters. Oil usually creates bad habits before it creates lasting prosperity. It can make governments spend too fast, depend too much, and ignore the rest of the economy. That is where Norway took a different path. By the end, you will understand how Norway got rich, why Norway is rich, and how Norway avoided the oil curse when so many others did not. This is not just a story about a distant country with offshore oil. It's a story about discipline, temptation, and what happens when easy money hits a political system. And that matters for anyone trying to understand prices, energy, jobs, and long-term stability. Stay until the end, because the final lesson goes way beyond Norway. Chapter 1. The resource trap most countries fall into. Oil looks like a shortcut to power. Find it, sell it, get rich. That's the promise. But a lot of oil states get richer on paper and weaker underneath. That is the resource curse. Dependence, corruption, inflation, and a country built around one price it cannot control. Look at Venezuela. Oil once dominated about 95% of its exports, and when oil prices collapsed after 2014, the economy went into free fall, with GDP crashing and shortages spreading into daily life. This is where it gets personal. When a country leans that hard on one commodity, the shock doesn't stay in boardrooms. It shows up in food lines, medicine shortages, and families watching their savings evaporate. Now look at Nigeria, where the IMF still warns that lower oil prices can weaken growth, government finances, and the external balance, even as the country pushes diversification. Think of it like building your whole household budget around overtime pay. It feels sustainable until one bad month blows a hole through everything. That is why oil alone doesn't explain how Norway got rich. Plenty of countries had oil wealth. Not many turned it into durable stability. The real test is not finding oil, but resisting what oil does to politics, spending, and expectations. This is about jobs, inflation, and what happens when easy money starts running a country. But Norway's edge did not start with oil itself. It started before the boom. Chapter 2. Norway treated oil like temporary wealth, not a permanent lifestyle. That sounds simple, but it changed everything. Why does that matter now? Because countries that mistake a boom for a stable future usually end up with inflation, weak budgets, and painful crashes. Norway's big move was not to pour all that cash straight into the domestic economy. It built a system that sends the net government cash flow from petroleum into its sovereign wealth fund instead. That means oil money gets turned into long-term financial assets, not just short-term political spending. Think of it like selling land and investing the money instead of using it for a few years of luxury. That's a huge part of how Norway avoided the oil curse. This mattered in real life, not just on paper. By investing abroad and limiting how much oil money hit the local economy at once, Norway reduced the risk of overheating and big oil price whiplash. That helps protect jobs, prices, and businesses outside the petroleum sector. So when people ask why Norway is rich, the answer is not just oil. It's that Norway refused to treat oil like an endless paycheck. Chapter 3. Strong institutions came before easy money. A lot of countries think oil creates discipline. Norway shows the reverse. Its discipline came first. Before oil transformed the Norway economy, the country already had trust, rules, and a political culture that could manage wealth without panicking. Easy money usually exposes weak institutions instead of fixing them. That meant oil entered a system that already knew how to handle conflict, taxes, and long-term planning. Norway was already a stable democracy with a capable public sector and strong social trust before the offshore boom really changed national finances.
The oil was the fuel, but the steering system was already there. That's a big part of how Norway got rich without falling apart politically. This is where the lesson gets uncomfortable for other countries. Resources don't magically build competence. They usually magnify whatever's already there, whether that's discipline or chaos. So why Norway is rich is not just a story about geology. It's a story about what kind of state existed before the first big oil money arrived.
Chapter 4: The Fund, the Limits, and the Long-Term Mindset. A lot of countries save oil money in theory. Norway built rules around it in practice. That is the difference between a cash pile and a system. The country sends the state's net petroleum cash flow into the government pension fund global, instead of treating oil revenue like normal income. That kind of discipline helps protect prices, jobs, and political stability when energy markets swing. Then came the limit. Norway's fiscal rule links spending over time to the fund's expected real return, estimated at 3%, and recent budgets say normal year withdrawals should stay below that. In other words, the country tries to live off the return, not tear through the principal. Think of it like owning an apartment building and spending the rent, not selling the floors one by one. That is a huge reason the sovereign wealth fund became a stabilizer instead of a political candy jar. And the scale is massive. At the end of 2025, the Norway Oil Fund was worth 21,268 billion kroner. But even with that size, the 2026 budget proposed fund spending equal to 2.8% of its value, not a reckless binge. That is the long-term mindset. Convert temporary oil wealth into lasting financial security without overheating the domestic economy. But even this model comes with a tension Norway cannot dodge forever. Chapter 5: The Real Lesson. Norway got rich by resisting temptation. Norway did not become a standout economic miracle just because it found oil. A lot of countries found oil. That part is not rare. What is rare is refusing to act like sudden wealth makes hard choices disappear. Why does that matter now? Because the same temptation still wrecks budgets, fuels inflation, and makes whole economies hostage to one boom. That's where Norway economic success becomes more than a nice story. The country built rules, saved aggressively, and treated petroleum money as something dangerous if handled badly, not just something exciting. Think of it like someone who gets a huge bonus and buys productive assets instead of upgrading every part of their lifestyle overnight. That choice protects future jobs, stabilizes prices, and gives the state more room when markets turn ugly. It's a big reason how Norway avoided the oil curse is really a story about restraint. So the real answer to why Norway is rich is not oil alone. It's that Norway kept saying no when easy money made yes feel irresistible. That lesson matters far beyond Norway, because every country hit by a windfall faces the same political test. Spend now and feel strong, or build slowly and stay strong later. But that raises one more problem. Even disciplined wealth can create blind spots if a country starts believing its model is untouchable. This is why Norway still matters now. It's not just a history story about oil in the North Sea. It's a live lesson in how countries handle sudden wealth, political pressure, and long-term choices. Understanding that helps you read headlines better, think more clearly about inflation, energy, and markets, and spot the difference between real strength and temporary cash. That matters whether they're watching governments, jobs, or their own money. It also shows that bad outcomes are not automatic. Countries are not doomed to waste windfalls, and voters are not powerless when leaders start acting like easy money solves everything. The smarter move is to look for discipline, rules, and whether wealth is being turned into lasting assets instead of short-term applause. That means reading beyond slogans, following where the money goes and asking harder questions when a boom starts looking like a miracle. That's where better decisions begin. So what do you think? Could most countries really copy Norway, or was Norway's model only possible because of the institutions it already had? And when easy money shows up, do politicians ever truly resist temptation for long? Subscribe, turn on notifications, and keep learning how geopolitics, economics, and power shape your everyday life. Because the next big boom may already be creating the next big mistake.